In a world where rivers wrote the rules of civilization, the Maya broke them. While the mighty Nile dictated Egypt's rise and the Tigris and Euphrates cradled Mesopotamia's glory, the Maya built an empire in defiance of water's flow. Deep within the Yucatan Peninsula, where the earth is porous and no great rivers dare to carve their way, the Maya flourished. This is the great paradox. A civilization that mapped the stars, raised stone cities into the canopy, and etched their legacy into time, yet did so without the very lifeline most empires depended upon. How could a people endure in a land where rainfall came in bursts and vanished without mercy, where streams sank into limestone before they could feed a field? Their world was carved not by water, but by will. To outsiders, it defies logic. To the Maya, it was home, a place of ceremony, struggle, and sublime understanding of nature's rhythm. They did not follow the rivers. They followed the sky. Every drop mattered. Every storm was a gift or a curse. And in that tension, they built something extraordinary. Their story is not just about survival without rivers. It is about redefining what survival means. To understand how they endured, we must go where maps show nothing but green. Into the forests, into the stone, into the silence where rivers should have been but weren't. There, the true power of the Maya begins to reveal itself not in what they had, but in how they adapted. And in that, they remind us, water may shape the earth, but it is humans who shape destiny. The Yucatan Peninsula is a land forged by contradictions, a lush canopy draped over a thirsty world. Beneath its dense jungles and echoing bird calls lies a geological riddle. A vast platform of limestone, riddled with fractures, swallow holes, and caverns. Here, the earth drinks greedily. Rain falls in torrents during fleeting wet seasons, only to vanish into the porous rock, leaving no rivers to wind across the landscape. There are no Nile-like arteries to flood the fields, no steady currents to guide trade. Instead, the Maya lived atop a labyrinth of hidden water, their world suspended between sky and stone. The terrain is deceptively generous, green, abundant, teeming with life, but below it lurks a dry truth. Fresh water was never a guarantee. In this unforgiving geography, the Maya made their home. They studied the land like scripture, memorizing its moods, sensing where the earth might hold a secret pool, where a crack in the stone might promise life. The absence of surface rivers wasn't a limitation, it was a call to innovation. Every decision from where to build a city to when to plant a seed had to account for a vanishing resource. The Yucatan was more than a setting, it was a test, and it shaped the Maya into masters of adaptation. In a world that refused to offer permanence, they built greatness from impermanence. Theirs was a civilization not of abundance, but of balance, not of excess, but of precision. And while rivers elsewhere flowed visibly, guiding empires like ribbons of fate, the Maya followed invisible paths carved into limestone, etched in ritual, remembered in the bones of the land. To the Maya, rain was not merely weather, it was divinity made manifest. In a world without rivers, the sky became a god, and its moods governed life and death. They called him Chak the Rainbringer, the Storm Shaper, the voice in thunder who carved the seasons across the heavens. With his lightning axe, he cleaved the clouds and spilled life upon the earth. Every farmer, priest, and king knew. Without Chak's blessing, the maize withered, the wells ran dry, and the gods fell silent. He was feared, worshipped, and summoned through ritual drenched in blood and fire. His image adorned temples and codices, eyes bulging, fangs curled, a serpent twisting from his brow. In a land where the rains came with fury and left with silence, the Maya mapped the sky with obsession. They tracked Venus, read eclipses, and built observatories to catch the whispers of Chak's return. But prayer alone was not enough. Their devotion had to be earned, proven through offerings, chants, and sacrifice. Children were led to sacred wells. Warriors stood atop pyramids beneath monsoon skies. Every act was a plea. Let the heavens open. Let life return. And when the clouds finally broke, it wasn't just rain, it was salvation. The roar of a storm was the voice of gods remembering their people. In that sacred transaction, the Maya didn't just live off the land, they negotiated with it. They understood something deeper. In the absence of rivers, you must make the sky your river. And that river flows only for those who revere it. Beneath the Maya's feet lay a hidden world, a silent, liquid labyrinth that defied the surface drought. These were the cenotes, sacred sinkholes formed when limestone ceilings collapsed, revealing vast underground reservoirs of fresh water. To the untrained eye, they appeared as serene pools ringed by vines and rock. But to the Maya, they were more than just water sources, they were portals to the underworld. Veins through which the earth breathed. Life above depended on what flowed below. Some cenotes were shallow and open, used for daily drinking and washing. Others plunged into shadowed depths, reserved for ceremony and communion with the gods. The most revered of these, like the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, were altars where offerings were cast into the abyss, jade, gold, and sometimes human lives. These pools were not built, they were discovered, honored, feared. Each one was mapped in memory, guarded in myth, and woven into the spiritual topography of the Maya world. In a landscape that refused to hold rivers, the cenotes held promise. They offered water that did not evaporate, wells that did not run dry, but they were unevenly scattered, their locations unpredictable, their access a matter of survival or collapse. Entire cities rose near them, and wars were fought to control them. To master a cenote was to master fate. The Maya adapted not by bending the land to their will, but by reading it, listening to its silence, and learning where it whispered of water. In the cenotes, they found not just sustenance, but the beating heart of a civilization that had no rivers, yet knew where to find flow. In the absence of flowing rivers, the Maya became architects of rain. Their survival depended not on chasing water, but on learning how to hold it, capture it, store it, honor it. Across the Yucatan and beyond, they carved the land with an engineering genius that rivaled any river-borne civilization. Chultun's bottle-shaped cisterns hollowed into the limestone were built beneath plazas and homes, their mouths sealed with stone lids and coated in plaster to retain the precious rainfall. These weren't simple water tanks, they were lifelines, each one a quiet miracle hidden beneath the feet of bustling cities. Where rainfall pooled naturally, they built aguadas and reservoirs, sunken basins lined with clay or stone, transformed into vast open-air tanks. In places like Tikal, miles of canals and causeways guided stormwater into storage complexes so precise they could sustain tens of thousands through the dry season. Their methods were subtle but immense gravity-fed systems, slope-calculated catchments, and even filtration layers using sand and charcoal. No drop went unclaimed. They read the slope of every courtyard, the angle of every roof, the softness of the stone. They did not fight nature, they partnered with it. Their cities didn't rise near rivers because they didn't need to. Instead, they brought the river to them, drop by drop, system by system, until their world became a living reservoir. This was more than technology, it was testimony. A declaration that human ingenuity can outlast scarcity, that stone can be taught to carry rain, and that even in silence, water can be heard if you know how to listen. They rose from the forest like visions: Tikal, Calakmul, Karakol, towering cities of stone that defied the logic of geography. No rivers fed them, no lakes anchored their growth, yet they pulsed with life. Tens of thousands lived, worked, and worshipped in these jungle metropolises, sustained not by flowing water but by the invisible web of ingenuity that lay beneath their feet. At Tikal, causeways and reservoirs fanned out like veins, channeling rainwater toward massive tanks lined with clay and sealed with lime plaster. In Karakol, terraces wrapped the hillsides to slow runoff and capture sediment-rich soil, while sacred courtyards doubled as water collectors, guiding every droplet toward carefully measured storage pits. These cities were not built beside water, they were built to summon it. Every step, every stone, every carved glyph was part of a grand choreography with the rain. And when the rains failed, as they sometimes did, the system bent but didn't break, at least not immediately. The Maya didn't just survive in these urban centers. They flourished. They held courts, built observatories, charted the cosmos, and conducted rituals that echoed through palaces. It is easy to imagine that such greatness could only bloom beside rivers. But the Maya redefined that assumption. They proved that the true foundation of a city is not its proximity to a river, but its ability to listen to the land, to adapt to its silences, to thrive in spite of what's missing. Their cities stand today not as ruins of failure, but as monuments to innovation, reminders that greatness can grow where water does not flow. In the Maya world, water was not simply a necessity, it was a form of power. To control it was to control life itself. And so, rain became currency, and those who claimed dominion over it claimed dominion over the people. The priest kings, perched atop their pyramids, stood as both astronomers and intermediaries, interpreters of Chalk's will and managers of the reservoirs that fed their cities. Access to water wasn't equal. It was filtered through layers of privilege, lineage, and belief. Elaborate ceremonies were staged to honor the rain gods, but they also reinforced the authority of the elite who orchestrated them. The ruling class aligned celestial events with the calendar of rainfall, staging bloodletting rites during the dry season, casting offerings into sacred cenotes when the clouds gathered. It was a theater of control, as much spiritual as political. Those who lived closest to the temples drank from the cleanest stores. Those on the peripheries, artisans, farmers, servants, waited for runoff, for trickle, for what remained. In times of scarcity, water was rationed, not by law, but by status. And yet, the system held because the people believed. They believed that the rain was divine, that their leaders were its voice, and that the ceremonies were the price of survival. In this delicate ecosystem of belief and infrastructure, the Maya created a civilization where water wasn't just managed, it was mythologized, weaponized, and revered. The river didn't run through their cities, but power did. It flowed from the heavens, through stone basins, into the hands of those who knew how to wait, how to plan, and how to rule by the rhythm of rain. Farming without rivers demands more than tools, it demands timing, memory, and an intimate dance with the land. For the Maya, agriculture was an act of orchestration, not conquest. Without the floodplains that fed the fields of Egypt or Mesopotamia, they carved sustenance from soil that dried too quickly and held little forgiveness. Maize, the sacred backbone of their diet, could not grow on faith alone. So they created systems adapted to every quirk of their terrain. In the highlands and hills, they built terraces, stone-framed platforms that captured both soil and rain. In low-lying wetlands, they raised fields above the floodline, forming chenampas of earth laced with canal veins that retained moisture long after the storms passed. In the uplands, where water was most elusive, they turned to slash and burn cycles, rotating plots in rhythms passed down through generations, letting the forest heal before returning to sow again. Every planting season began not with plows, but with sky watching. They waited for signs, the position of Venus, the whisper of winds, the echo of thunder beyond the canopy. And when the first drops finally fell, it wasn't just the soil that awakened. Entire communities moved in sync, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing. Farming was collective survival, and failure meant famine. Yet, even in the leanest years, the Maya persisted. Their resilience wasn't in overwhelming nature, it was in harmonizing with it. In knowing when to yield, when to wait, and and when to gather the strength of the land into a single grain of maize. In a world without rivers, the fields did not thirst because the people had learned to anticipate the sky, to capture its gifts, and to plant their future in the promise of each fleeting storm. But no system, no matter how sacred or sophisticated, is immune to the silence of the sky. When the rains failed not for weeks, but for years, the Maya faced a reckoning written in dust and despair. The climate turned, slowly at first, then with cruel insistence. Droughts gripped the land, stretching across decades, confirmed centuries later by tree rings, lake sediments, and the drying echoes of abandoned cities. The gods stopped speaking. Chalk's axe no longer split the clouds. Reservoirs cracked open, their floors littered with fish bones and forgotten offerings. The soil hardened, the maize shriveled, and with it, so did faith. Without rivers to buffer the land, the Maya relied wholly on the sky's mercy. And when that mercy vanished, the consequences were brutal. Famine spread like wildfire, trade routes faltered, rebellions simmered. Temples once filled with chants echoed only with wind. Inscriptions speak of kings desperate for rain, of rituals turning darker, more frequent, more frantic. Entire cities once teeming with life emptied, their people scattering into the forest or seeking refuge in better watered lands to the north. The drought didn't come as a single blow, it arrived as a slow unraveling. The threads of a civilization, tightly woven by engineering and belief, began to fray. And yet, this was not extinction. It was transformation, a recalibration of what survival meant when the gods fell silent and the sky betrayed its promise. For the Maya, drought was not just a natural disaster, it was an existential one, testing the limits of their systems, their faith, and their ability to endure without the one element they could never fully command. In the face of unrelenting drought, the Maya turned upward not in surrender, but in supplication. Theirs was a cosmos where the divine lived among the stars, where patterns in the heavens echoed through soil and bone. And so, when the rains refused to fall, they did not abandon their gods, they intensified their devotion. Ceremonies grew larger, more elaborate, more desperate. Entire plazas became stages for ritual, where incense thickened the air and chants rose in unison toward a sky that answered with silence. At the heart of these rites stood Chak, the rain god who once answered with thunder but now had to be called forth through sacrifice. Blood was the language of renewal, and the Maya spoke it fluently, through thorn-drawn offerings from kings, through obsidian cuts on dancers' limbs, and, in the most sacred acts, through the lives of the chosen. Children, warriors, captives offered into cenotes or laid upon altars became messengers, their spirits sent to plead for rain in the watery underworld. But these were not mindless rituals. They were calculated, aligned with astronomical events, solstices, and planetary cycles. Temples were built as instruments of light and shadow, guiding when and how these rituals should unfold. Even in desperation, the Maya sought order. In the celestial vault, they saw not chaos, but timing, precision, hope. Each ceremony was a bridge between past and future, heaven and earth, drought and deliverance. And as the flames rose and drums echoed across jungle canopies, the Maya reminded the cosmos that they were still watching, still waiting, still believing. In a world where rivers did not flow, their survival depended on persuading the sky to remember them. Carved in stone and folded into bark paper codices, the Maya left behind not just myths but warnings. Their glyphs, etched into stelae and temple walls, speak in a language of kings and gods. But beneath the regal poses and divine masks lies a more fragile truth. The struggle for water. Calendar wheels record cycles of abundance and absence. Inscriptions describe ceremonial appeals to Chak, droughts that shattered dynasties, migrations born of thirst. A monument at Tikal speaks of a great burning of hearts in a year of no rain, while the Dresden Codex charts the timing of Venus, linked to rainfall and sacrifice. These were not just stories, they were survival guides. Historical memory encoded into architecture and scroll. The Maya understood that water wasn't merely a physical resource, it was a historical force, one that shaped their rise and threatened their fall. And they documented its power with obsessive precision. In their codices, astronomers noted celestial patterns that predicted seasonal rains. In their murals, priests offered bowls to the heavens. In their stele, kings boasted of appeasing gods through offerings. Yet behind the triumph, one can feel the shadow of fear, the knowledge that no rite could guarantee the sky's favor. Today, archaeologists decipher these texts not just to understand belief, but to map crisis. The years when reservoirs dried, when crops failed, when chaos followed silence. The Maya did not simply live in the present, they anticipated loss. They inscribed their warnings so future generations might listen, might learn. In their stones, we find echoes not only of collapse, but of caution, and perhaps of hope. The collapse did not thunder down in a single night. It crept like drought itself, slow, invisible, and devastating. City by city, the southern lowlands emptied. Tikal, Copan, Dos Pilas, once vibrant centers of politics, astronomy, and faith fell into stillness. Temples once fed by offerings were overtaken by vines. Ball courts where kings once staged sacred games lay abandoned beneath drifting leaves. It was not just the rain that vanished. It was the rhythm of civilization. Trade routes disintegrated, alliances frayed, and with each missed rainy season, more families packed their histories and fled into the jungle. Some sought refuge in the north. Others faded into the forest's folds, leaving behind only stone and silence. Archaeologists now read the signs in pollen records and lakebed sediments. Fields left untended, cities deserted, population crashes too sharp to ignore. And yet, there was no single villain, no invading army, no deadly plague. The culprit was climate. The rain, the Maya's river in the sky, had changed its course, and with it, the fragile balance they had mastered unraveled. The systems they built were brilliant, but even brilliance has its threshold. The collapse was not a failure of intelligence, it was the collision of human limits with nature's unpredictability. And as the jungles reclaimed what was built, the Maya story shifted from one of dominance to one of endurance. For even in collapse, something survived. Not all cities vanished. Not all people disappeared. And the knowledge of stars, stone, and survival was never fully lost. Out of the shadows of collapse, new cities emerged quieter, smaller, yet wiser. In the northern Yucatan, places like Uxmal, Mayapan, and Chichen Itza began to flourish, built not on the grandeur of monuments alone, but on adaptability. Here, cenotes were not distant lifelines, they were central, abundant, open to the sky. Chichen Itza, in particular, rose near several major cenotes, its very foundation wrapped around access to permanent, clean water. The architecture reflected a shift not just in materials and style, but in worldview. The great stepped pyramids, like El Castillo, were astronomical tools, but also rain calendars, casting serpent-shaped shadows during equinoxes to signal planting seasons. The rituals continued, but the tone had changed, less imperial, more pragmatic. Trade resumed, stretching to the Gulf and deep into Central America, bringing salt, obsidian, cacao, and copper. The Maya hadn't vanished. They had restructured, relocating to lands where rainfall was more predictable, where survival no longer teetered so precariously on celestial whims. And though the priest kings of the past gave way to more collective governance, the reverence for water remained. The memory of drought, carved deep into generational consciousness, shaped every decision. In these cities, water was not just sacred, it was strategy. A civilization that once reached for the heavens now anchored itself in the earth, in stability, The fall of the South was not the end of the Maya, it was their reinvention. And in that reinvention, we see the genius of a people who refused to disappear, who rewrote their survival story with every drop they could still gather from the sky and stone. Today, long after the temples have crumbled and the jungle has swallowed once mighty avenues, the wisdom of the Maya flows again, not through conquest, but through curiosity. Modern scientists, engineers, and hydrologists are returning to those ancient reservoirs, peering into chultans and mapping buried canals with LiDAR and drone-mounted sensors. What they find isn't primitive guesswork, it's precision. Layered catchments that account for evaporation, lime-sealed basins that rival modern concrete, sediment filters that purified runoff centuries before such systems had names. In a world now grappling with climate unpredictability, these ancient blueprints offer not nostalgia, but solutions. Architects of sustainable cities study Maya layouts for passive water management. Farmers in drought-prone zones mimic the old chinampas and raised fields. In a twist of history, the descendants of those who once begged chalk for mercy now teach us how to live with less. But this isn't just about science, it's about reverence. To walk through Uxmal or Tikal today is to feel the presence of people who understood the limits of their world and innovated anyway. Their cities were not accidents of abundance, but masterpieces of necessity. The Maya teach us that survival isn't just about resources, it's about relationships. To the land, to the sky, to time itself. And in an age where water again grows scarce and the climate turns erratic, their voice rises from the stone, whispering not just what was, but what could be. In the end, the Maya didn't need rivers to become eternal. They carved civilization into stone, calibrated calendars with the stars, and built cities whose foundations were not watered by current, but by comprehension. Where others followed the flow of rivers, the Maya followed the silence, learning how to store, how to wait, how to listen. They mapped invisible paths across a thirsty land, turning scarcity into innovation, belief into engineering, and ritual into resilience. Their story isn't one of miracles, it's one of mastery. They remind us that survival is not always about abundance, but about wisdom. Not about conquering nature, but aligning with it. Even as their cities fell and their gods fell silent, the knowledge endured etched in limestone, hidden beneath vines, whispered through the cenotes. Today, when we ask how the Maya survived without rivers, we are really asking how humans adapt when the world offers no easy path. And the answer is there. In every carved stair, every sealed chultan, every glyph that mourns a vanished rain, the Maya did not wait for rivers. They made their own flow from sky to stone, from past to future.